Hello, welcome to our Heritage Works. Today, we are going to do a restoration on a 100-year-old plant stand. This plant stand was made by my grandmother's brother for their mother back in the 1920s. We're not sure of the exact date, but we know it was roughly in the mid to early 1920s. And he did a really good job. It's lasted a long time. My great grandmother had it. It was in different places. And then when she passed away, it had gone to my grandmother. And I remember seeing it when I was a child in her home. It has a really old repair. I'm not going to do anything with this, though. I did think long and hard. Do I take away all of the old character and sand it down and bring it back to almost brand new looking? In the end, I decided that I'm going to do the most minimal that I can and let that character and the wornness come through. On the surface, this seemed like a very, very simple repair. Just glue it back together and be done and move on. And that's because the base has a very clean set of breaks to it, and the pieces fit very well back together. But ultimately, this was more of a challenge than I thought it would be. But as you can see, it's a clean break, and it's just from the grain and all the weight being right there in the center and having the legs, the pad legs off to the outside corners. If I had decided to sand this down, I would have done one thing, and that is to turn the grain of the top and the base in the same direction. It bothered me a little bit, but that's the way it was made. I decided that's the way I was going to keep it. The first thing I did was I gave this a really good cleaning. I cleaned it with some Murphy's oil soap and wiped down all the surfaces. And this was just to give me a good clean surface so that I knew exactly what I had to work with. Then I decided I need to see how clean of a break this is. At this point, I was still trying to decide if I wanted to strip it down, if I needed dowels or not. And so I decided to put this clamp on. And then the plant stand is upside down. And I'm going to apply the base back together just to see if it'll fit. This was a first step, and I wanted to just see if it'll work. And the clamp is there just to hold the base up while I do a dry fit. As I do the dry fit, you'll notice that it is an extremely good break. And once I put the clamps on it, the cracks basically disappear. And it was at this point that I'm starting to go, okay, I can work with this and go from there. Now, one of the things that happened while I was doing this is part of the base came apart. So this was on one of the two halves that had broken off. I decided to go ahead and remove the screws, clean up the glue, and then re-glue it so that it was fresh because it was loose. Now, most of this you can't see because it's off the screen. I apologize for that. But I used my Dremel tool just to clean up those edges and get the glue off and to prepare it for a glue up. The pads underneath, as I touched them, they came off on one side. The other side stayed on fairly well, so I let that go. But I am gluing it up, and in a moment you'll see that I'll put it on a clamp and let this dry overnight before I proceed. In the meantime, while the glue was drying, I wanted to go ahead and proceed where I was going to put dowels going across this base The purpose of the dowels is to give it structural support while it's back being used as a base and the pressure coming down. I want those dowels to help um, maintain that pressure. So what I'm doing is I'm taking just a dab of paint and putting it where I want the dowels, and then I'm pressing it into where it's going to go, and it transfers those paint spots. And that then allows me to know exactly where to drill my holes so that they're going to line up perfectly. Because of the unevenness of the side of the brakes, I started with a small bit and then went to a larger bit. I still did not like the feel and the size of the holes, so I got me a different bit so that I could make cleaner holes for the dowels. And here I am marking the other side for where the dowels are going to be, and it did a much better job. I used a dowel or a bit on my drill that had a little extra bit at the beginning, and that allowed it to go into the wood and not move on me because of the uneven surface. And it kind of held it steadier than I could get with just my hand alone. So I'm going ahead, marking where I want the dowels to be. I'm going to drill them out, and then I'm going to glue this base together. You'll see me take a dowel and put it in the holes, and this is to test the fit and to do a rough estimate of how long of a dowel I need. I then cut the dowels to length based on the size of the hole, the length, the depth that I went into the wood, and then together I was able to glue both halves at the same time. I do a great deal of test fitting for each dowel, for the sides, and making sure that I can get this all back together in a fairly quick order before I actually apply the glue. Because once I put the glue on, I want to move quickly and get it together, lined up perfectly. And so I'm doing several tests here just to make sure that I can do it quickly and efficiently. Because of all the test fitting, I realized that I would not be able to use the clamp to hold things up, and I wanted to go ahead and remove the remaining part of the base and glue it up and then reattach it to the rest of the plant stand. It was interesting that these bolts were really tough to pull out, but I did get them out. They were rusted. The last one I actually had to just kind of twirl off and then remove. The head was just so badly rusted. Once I was happy with my dry fit, I then did the final glue up. Now, by doing the base this way, originally the smaller square inside is what had the screws and attached to the base, and then the bottom of the base was attached to that. Since I removed the screws and I'm gluing it up this way, I'm going to have to, in the end, extend the screw holes through to the outside, and I've replaced the screws with more modern ones. The other ones were just too far gone. After the glue dry, I scraped down where the foot pads needed to go and got all the old stuff off and decided to go ahead and get those glued on. Two of them were completely off and had to be re-glued. The other two were loose, and I just simply did a little bit of glue and got it up underneath. Um, then I also glued the top. It was just barely wiggling, and the screws weren't going to come out easily or cleanly, so I opted to just simply clean them up a little bit and put it back on. This did mean doing some interesting clamping. I didn't have any clamps that were long enough for um, the whole plant stand, so I took care of that. I also did some other cleanup work, like someone had used some strapping tape on there. I cleaned it off. I did a little bit of putty work just to see how it would go and decided really quick that it was not going to work. The piece did need a new cleaning from all the sawdust that had been around. So all of this cleanup stuff just simply went on, and it was a matter of reassembling at this point. All I have to do is remove the clamps, and then let's see what it looks like when we're done. An interesting tie-in, the flowers that are on this plant stand now that it's completed were the flowers that I got from my grandmother's funeral. So it's come full circle that a plant stand that was built by my grandmother's brother for their mother, then passed down to my grandmother, now has plants on it that came from her funeral. What a wonderful cycle. Thank you for watching.